You won't believe what happened last week right here on our ranch. Something that felt straight out of a wild movie but was all too real. Imagine this. It's a quiet afternoon. My daughter is playing outside like she always does. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the HOA president, the infamous Karen from down the street, calls the cops, saying she needs to take my daughter away. Just like that. She gave them 5 minutes to show up and do what she demanded. The nerve. What she didn't know, though, was that I'm not just any homeowner Rhyme, the sheriff around here. And that changed everything. This story isn't just about a crazy HOA Karen gone too far. It's about what happens when someone tries to overstep boundaries they have no right to cross. It's about family, authority, and standing your ground when the pressure's on. From the moment she made that call, things escalated fast, trust me. You don't want to miss how it all went down. I'm sharing this to give you a front row seat to the chaos and tension that unfolded, because it's about way more than just a neighborhood dispute. It's about respect, safety, and knowing exactly who's in charge when things get heated. As a sheriff, I'm sworn to protect, but this time, it got personal in a way I never expected. Stay tuned, because the moment those cops showed up, the real story began. Would they listen to the crazy claims, or would I have to step in to keep my family safe? The answer might shock you, so make sure you stick around for the next part, where I break down exactly how this all played out and why this HOA Karen will think twice before messing with me or my family again. You're going to want to hear every detail. To really understand what happened that day, you've got to know a little about this HOA president, Karen. She's the type who always thinks she's got the right to control everything around here, who can come and go, what people can do on their own property, and how the neighborhood should be run. There have been little run-ins before, but nothing like this. Usually, it's just annoying notes on my door or complaints about harmless things like where I park or how my lawn looks. But this time, she took it way too far. Our ranch has always been my daughter's safe space. It's where she runs free, learns about nature, and just enjoys being a kid without the usual city noise or crowds. We moved out here to get away from drama and to raise her with some peace and freedom. So, hearing that Karen was threatening to call the cops to take my daughter away felt like crossing a line that should never be crossed. What made it worse was how fast everything happened. The moment Karen made that call, she started knocking on my door, pushing her way into my personal space and insisting she had some kind of right to do this. She kept saying, "You don't understand the rules," as if that gave her authority over my family. I tried to explain calmly, but she wasn't having it. The tension was building, and I could tell things were about to get ugly. Meanwhile, I was watching my daughter in the yard, confused and a little scared. I could see she didn't understand why someone was causing all this trouble. And honestly, neither did I, at least not fully, until I realized Karen had a plan to use the cops as her backup to force us to comply. What happened when the cops arrived? Would they listen to her or to me? That part is coming up next, but trust me, it's not what you'd expect. The stakes were higher than anyone knew, and the real test of authority and protection was just about to begin. As the minutes ticked by, the air grew thicker with tension. Karen was still standing at my front door, her voice sharp and demanding, pushing her so-called authority like a shield. She kept repeating that the HOA rules gave her the right to intervene, to protect the community, she claimed. But I knew her real motive wasn't about rules, it was about control, and maybe even some personal grudge against me. Over the years, we'd clashed a few times over minor issues, but nothing this serious. Now it felt like all those old conflicts were coming to a boiling point. And my family was caught right in the middle. Inside, my daughter's innocent eyes watched everything unfold, unsure why a stranger was acting like she owned the place. I could see the confusion and fear in her face, and it tightened my chest. This wasn't just about some HOA dispute, Anymore, it was about protecting my family's peace and safety. The ranch was our sanctuary, a place where my daughter should feel safe and free. But now, with Karen stirring up trouble and calling in the police, everything was at risk. Then I thought about the cops. I know law enforcement, inside and out. I've worn the badge, and I know how situations like this can escalate or get twisted when outsiders don't understand the full story. What if they didn't see it from my side? What if Karen spun her version so well that the cops would just come in and take over, forcing me to stand down? I wasn't just worried about the rules or the HOA. Anymore, I was worried about what might happen if authority is misused against me and my family. Meanwhile, neighbors started to gather at a distance, whispers and glances thrown my way. Some looked curious, some judgmental, and others clearly siding with Karen. It felt like this wasn't just a personal fight, was becoming a neighborhood spectacle. Subtle alliances and old resentments bubbled under the surface, adding more pressure to the already intense situation. But I wasn't going to let things spiral out of control. I stayed calm, ready to show them all that I'm the one who protects this land and these people. Yet, deep down, I knew the hardest part was still ahead, the moment when those cops would step onto my property. And all eyes would be on us. Would they understand who I really am? Would they see the truth behind Karen's lies? Or would this turn into something far worse? The tension was unbearable, and the clock was still ticking. The sound of sirens in the distance broke the heavy silence that had settled over the ranch. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to happen. Karen's face twisted into a smug smile, like she'd already won before the cops even pulled up. But I knew better. I knew that the truth, and who really held the authority here, was about to come face to face with her lies. The neighbors fell quiet as the patrol car rolled down the dirt road. I could see them through the windows, watching closely, waiting to see who would back down first. My daughter clung to my leg, her little hands trembling. I knelt down to look her in the eyes, trying to give her calm, even as my own mind raced. This was no longer just a fight over HOA rules or property lines. It was about protecting my family, my home, and making sure no one could bully us with threats and false claims. The officer stepped out, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. His eyes scanned the scene, taking in Karen's determined stance and my steady presence. I could tell he was trying to figure out what was really going on. Karen launched into her version of the story, her voice sharp, filled with urgency and accusation. She claimed there was an immediate danger, that my daughter wasn't safe, and that the HOA had the right to intervene. I held my ground, speaking, clearly explaining who I was, what the situation really was, and why Karen's demands were not only wrong, but dangerous. I could see the flicker of doubt cross the officer's face, and I knew the moment was critical. The whole neighborhood was watching, waiting for the police to take a side, for the tension to snap one way or the other. The seconds stretched long as the officer weighed his options. Karen's voice grew more insistent, her tone almost desperate. Now, sensing the control slipping away, I stood firm, ready to protect my daughter no matter what it took. The ranch, our home, had never felt so fragile, and yet I was more determined than ever to defend it. And then, just when it seemed like the standoff would last forever, something unexpected happened that shifted everything and changed the game entirely. But that moment you'll have to wait to hear about next. Just as I thought the tension might start to ease, the officer's radio crackled unexpectedly, cutting through the charged silence. He glanced down, then back up at me with a serious look I hadn't seen before. "We've just received an anonymous tip about an ongoing dispute involving your property and a reported safety concern," he said, voice low but firm. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Karen's call. Any more, someone else had stepped into the picture. someone who clearly wanted to stir things up even more. Karen's eyes narrowed, her confidence flickering for the first time. She had clearly planned for the cops to back her up. But now there was this new twist, something she hadn't accounted for. The anonymous tip meant the situation was about to get even messier. The officer looked at me again, waiting for a response. But honestly, I was caught off guard too. I had no idea who would send that tip or what exactly they were trying to make it seem like. My daughter stayed close by my side, sensing the growing tension, but too young to understand the full weight of what was happening. I glanced around at the neighbors watching from their yards. Whispers turned to murmurs, and I could feel the pressure building like a storm about to break. The ranch, once a place of peace, was now a battleground of misunderstandings, accusations, and hidden motives. The officer asked me a few more questions, his tone now more cautious. It was clear he was trying to separate. The tension reached a breaking point as the officer's phone buzzed again. This time, he excused himself and stepped aside to take the call. I watched Karen's face tighten with frustration, while I stayed calm, knowing I had to be ready for whatever came next. When the officer returned, his expression was serious but clearer. The anonymous tip was traced back to someone in the neighborhood, he said quietly. It seems this situation has been blown out of proportion by personal grudges, not any real safety concern. That was the moment everything started to shift. The officer turned to Karen and said firmly, "Your claims about taking custody of the child are unfounded. There is no legal basis for removing her, especially without any evidence of harm or neglect." Karen's confident posture faltered, her voice losing its sharp edge. The power she thought she held was slipping through her fingers. I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion wash over me. My daughter clung to me, safe and sound, exactly where she belonged. The neighbors around us began to murmur, some nodding in quiet support, others avoiding eye contact with Karen. The truth was out, and the lies had crumbled under the weight of facts. But just as I thought it was over, the officer glanced at me with a new urgency. "One more thing," he said. "We received a second tip, this one about a potential trespasser spotted near your property earlier today. Has anyone tried to get in without permission?" I shook my head, confused. That was when the ranch security camera footage started playing on the officer's tablet. There, clear as day, was a shadowy figure moving stealthily near the barn. Very same time Karen was making her calls. It wasn't just about the HOA drama anymore. Someone had been trying to stir up trouble from the shadows, using the chaos to cover their real intentions. And suddenly, Karen's aggressive behavior looked less like a power trip and more like a distraction from something bigger. The officer looked at me, his eyes sharp. "We're going to investigate this. You did the right